good afternoon, and depending on whenever you're watching this, greetings appropriate for that time of the day. This is the first meeting of the COD project community in 2024. We are in May, so calling it a first meeting is also a very interesting thing. But nonetheless, one has to start. Uh, what we'll be doing is walking through some of the things that are happening with the community. If more people join, we'll be discussing some of the upcoming capabilities and features, and then kind of slowly wrapping it up. So to kick off the proceedings, I'll hand it over to Amar and he can get started. Amar, all yours.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to COD Community Meetup. We plan to do this monthly starting this time. Idea is to majorly discuss around the top roadmap items, things which happened in the last 1 month, and at least what is immediately out there, and leave it out to developers and community members to uh, discuss or take the discussion in whichever way they need, right? So you want to understand more things, you can use this as a forum to discuss. There is no what do you say, stupid questions. Every question is valid, and if it is a question you have, that means that either we will eventually fix the documentation to address that question, or if it is not relevant but you are still asking it, we will try to answer and see how do we bridge it. So end of the day, COD, always we have visualized this to be a chain which solves the use cases, like problems in the real world, right? So hence, anything you bring up with new use cases, new things, we are happy to take those questions, take that discussion forward, see how we can help you use the card, or we can enable you to contribute to the same project, right? It is an open source project. We are happy to take your contributions into the repo, and let's see how the community grows and how do you contribute. So with that, my first topic would be to discuss on what is happening recently and how do we go through. So if I'll just give a brief and then I'll open it up for the questions and discussions, because considering it's a first meeting, so there may be just open questions to start with. So one of the things which happened over the uh, recent times is, along with we focusing on Confidex as a rating enabler, because Confidex is a network which is built using COD. The alpha network or the staging network is already up and running, and it is majorly built to handle the rating of the ONDC focus thing. In ONDC, it being a more of a backend protocol based network, there can be multiple parties, and it is quite decentralized by vision. But in that scenario, considering a seller can participate in multiple networks, so there had to be a way where all of this is aggregated, especially his rating, or his or her rating in terms of seller, right? So that was the major use cases which we tried to solve in using COD, and we were successful. Now there is a palette in COD which is similar to smart contract, if you are not already familiar with COD ecosystem. So which enables the aggregated rating, uh, or aggregated score, whatever you want to call it, on the chain. So this works as more of a ledger. So that was completed. It is working, and based on some of the protocol discussion, application discussions, whatever was required was pushed into the called repo. So that is there. Along with it, we also experimented with the new introduction, or I think some of you would have seen some of the recent post on Finternet, which has been discussed from BIS, right? The International Standards Bureau for International Standards for some of this. So, and I think our own Mr. Nandan Nilekani also contributed to that paper. The idea of some of the things which has been discussed there, like asset tokenization and other things, we have been visualizing how to do that on card, and there is a palette for that also. So we did work on that palette. So it is in the functional condition. There is a script which you can run to understand how all of this works using the asset palette. In the card SDK repository. So those are the main things which have been happening. Other than that, there is a PRs which are coming up, so that we are keeping it up to date with the latest changes, and we are trying to build couple of runtimes, making it possible to handle multiple chains together and things like that. So yeah, that's the thing which has happened in the recent times. So keep watching our issues list and the PR list to watch for upcoming things. So yeah, with that, the version as of now is 9.20. Technically, we are not making a, what do you say, version released yet, because what is happening is every PR is incremental and can start on a what do you say, particular spec version, and you can actually do the on-chain upgrade of all these chains, and hence you can start on any commit, any latest branch, which is also available in Docker Hub. So we encourage you to get started as and when you see the card repo, right? So that's the idea on this. So eventually we will the idea is upcoming quarters and a few months we will be reaching 1.0 release. When I say 1.0, yeah, it is end of the day in some number, but an idea that we will be supporting multi-chains by that time. There may be a few more features, and we will be publishing a lot more roadmap items on the repo. So we like you to contribute back, saying, okay, what do you want to look in the repo, and whatever, you can always use the discussion board to get the discussion started. Yeah, with that, I will give a pause and open up the floor for any questions, any discussions, and happy to answer anything related. And yeah, I mean, before opening up, any other like major contributions are coming to repo from Satish and Vatsa right now. So do you guys have any comments or anything you want to talk, Satish, Vatsa?
Hey, just one thing to highlight. I think when we refer to code, we always need to think as like it is a multi-repo thing. It is a code as the DLT is one of the repos, and Code SDK is the preferred way to access it today for applications. I think that's the Code SDK, which is in TypeScript. And the third one is always the app ecosystem, right? The apps and how you access it through the UI way. So each of those repos offers contribution opportunities, right? And so you can start where you're comfortable with, and maybe SDK could be a great starting point for some of you, like not only limited to TypeScript, but also can extend it to other languages, so that all kind of applications can start leveraging code. Because one of the things that we focused on while developing the SDK and the APIs are, how do we make this available for both Web3 and Web2 applications? So how do we make sure that again the integrations are available for the existing applications, or even the new applications you create, right? So just want to highlight that again, because it should not kind of feel that again there's only one repo, right? There are multiple repos, and start the contributions. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, for those who are watching it on the YouTube later, the description would have the link to repos. Do watch out. And card.network is our URL that will have pointers to all these repos. Thank you. Thank you, Satish, yeah, for that clarification. Okay, so I don't hear any questions, but I just want to highlight few things. Other than what I mentioned about what is happening, is the card as a project. We are associated with one of the initiatives which is happening in India called Code for GovTech. It is also short named as C4GT. And hence, you would see some of our issues in the GitHub with a tag called C4GT. So that is with that, how we are doing it is C4GT has a forum where they can list multiple projects from different repos, which are uh, possibly enabling the large scale population scale projects which can help in the governance of a large country, right? So hence it is called GovTech, and CORD is one of them. So never get confused on that tag in the GitHub issues. Even though it is marked as C4GT, anybody, even if you are not associated with C4GT, you can contribute. The idea was to enable that particular community to discover the issues from our repo much easily, because that has a lot of students who would be looking for internship to some project to contribute in the open source world. Hence, it is hence that is one thing to be aware of if you are a developer looking for the CORD repo. Okay. Any questions? Anything on the repos? Anything you want to talk or cover today? Happy to talk through that.
I wanted to check, like, how has been the experience engaging with the new contributors to the C4GT and other efforts that we are doing? Is like, how quickly are they getting up to speed? What are the things that we have learned that we can improve in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, I think Srivasa here would be a better person to answer that, because he has been actively participating on the GitHub issue board, discussion board to help them. Vasa, over to you.
Yeah, initially I think the in few aspects the documentation was a little bit not that up to date. With that getting fixed, I think the new contributors are getting in how to do it quickly and understanding the requirement and able to code. With some minor comments, I think they're able to pass the CIs and getting the PRs merged.
So you are saying that contributors are not interacting too many things, right? So you are able to give them enough pointers in one place and they are able to manage it themselves. Because are you hand holding them regularly to their first issue, or are they able to manage most of the things by looking into the documentation? Now I'm asking about now. I agree, eventually everything starts with something scratch, right? We have fixed documentation. So now how is the state if somebody is joining or coming to our community? How are they feeling the latest experience? Are they able to manage themselves?
Yes, they're able to manage themselves.
Okay. That is nice. What else do we have that we want to bring up? Satish, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking like if there are no questions, definitely like to go through some of the open issues and try to understand like what are the thoughts behind it. Like maybe I'll start with 450, the pull request that is. I think Vatsa opened it. That's about
You
adding.
want to share screen, or Vatsa wants to share screen so that we can have that on screen?
Yeah, I can share the screen quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. It's adding custom metadata storage.
So I'm opening it. So you can talk through this.
So this is a draft implementation. What would be the future way of creating metadata into the chain?
But
This is
wait, let me ask the very naive question. Why do we need this?
Yeah, the one of the currently the use case which I have highlighted here is like when we migrate into a new chain, the created act would be the current date instead of the date which the older blocks were created. So we can dump the data as a time which the older blocks were created into here. So apps can access through the storage of blockchain.
Yeah, so a couple of suggestions on this. Like one is when we talk about what we need is a key value storage option, and that should be an independent palette, right? And when you create a key value option as a palette, because not part of the asset, it should be a key value as a separate palette that can be used by all the palettes or all the functionalities out there. One of the things to try and do is the key of the key value should be ideally a CID, which is because it should mimic the IPFS way of doing things. Because if some of the participant decide to use say IPFS as the key value store and start referencing that identifier into the links, I think it should be able to resolve it. So this is kind of like if people don't want to store in IPFS and if they don't have an IPFS cluster running, I think this can provide an equivalent option, maybe with a lower capacity, not like IPFS undefined unlimited capacity, but lower capacity. So because if we try to do it with an identifier that exists, I think then it becomes difficult to maybe cross-reference and kind of reuse that thing in multiple palettes and multiple smart contracts and all, because each of the, like for example, like an asset is a key ID and the asset meta, if you need to be referenced in some other context, the people might not have the ability to do that, or cannot independently kind of assign responsibility, saying that there could be reads or writes or some part being encrypted. So because a key value store can come with its own set of things, because the way to view is the value could be anything. It could be plain text, it could be a blob, it could be an encrypted thing, depending on what application. Because this become even more critical when people use it with smart contracts, where we don't control what that value is going to be. Only thing we can control is what's the length being supported. That is another point I got confused a bit, because I saw that the max length is supported as 5. So max.
No, that's the maximum number of key value pairs support.
Maximum number of key value pairs.
Yeah, 5.
Satish, I will just talk about this one, because I think Vatsa did discuss with me offline about this, right? So this was an example of how we would add information, extra information to identifier, which would be there already. Because our chain, the difference compared to other chains is we run with the identifier, which can go through an update or a revocation, state change, or things like that. So, but there is no provision for any data to come in, because everything works as a mostly either a state change, and everything is PII friendly. What it means is we don't store any data at all. And there is in some scenarios where some use cases in certain chains, because the card can be installed as a separate network altogether, as a on-prem or a permissioned network. So there may be use cases where people may need a certain extra tags to certain way of tagging certain identifiers, or putting some extra information with the identifiers, so that when somebody refers to these identifiers, they have extra information. Hence, we thought of an option of adding metadata. Here, the reason of metadata itself, we thought initially of it to be a free-flowing string. So then free-flowing string by itself would not have complete context. I mean, we may have to override something or other things. But what we thought is identifier can have a key value type of storage, like a tag. So here value is a bound, as in key also is a bounded vec, value is also a bounded vec. A value can be, as you said, right? It can be a binary, it can be a text, it can be a CID, or even a CID for a particular identifier can be added here. So the thing is, it is associated to identifier right now as a concept, so that you can put extra information when you query, you get it. So you get that when you query the identifier, you get it as a reference. So this was just a example. Idea was with identifier as a particular section, you could do a meta query, and that should be giving. And key 5 is like a string here, right? Instead of key 5, we can actually say like some timestamp or some extra data, some tag which may say that, oh, this is application name, something like that.
No. So there are two things. Like one is when you say when we refer it as a key value store,
Mhm.
the key value store kind of brings up a picture of like there is a key and there's a value, right? It won't bring the picture of like there is a key with 5 values. So
No, there is no single key with 5 values. So it is actually metadata is what I think. So we can actually,
yeah, this could be just a JSON blob, right? Okay, let people say this could be 5 or 10 or whatever, as long as the length has been met. They
we can do that too. Not an issue.
value that is coming in. That is one. And the second is if we reuse the same identifier, that basically means we need to modify all the other palettes to say that meta is yes or no, right? How do we can identify that whether an identifier has a meta or not?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, and if that meta, you know, I'm just thinking like whether we.
Yeah, so I think I'm also
Yeah.
open to discussion, because this was just a way we wanted to bring some. I mean, even this is in the draft mainly because of requiring to discussion.
Right.
So see, we can make it as a separate palette, as a separate key value store. Then how do you link it to an identifier? My use case is simple. I'll say like today.
No. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like we're
Huh.
not linking it to an identifier.
Uh-huh.
It is like if the value has been stored, the value has an identifier created. Now, if some of the transaction need that to be linked, I think that can be dealt with the palette thing, because where we clearly know that okay, there is an identifier that can be there's a value that has been stored, rather than we say meta is yes, where people kind of struggle say that okay, where to query, right?
Okay. So the way I was visualizing is, see, because instead of treating it as a separate key value or a CID type of thing, so anyway, identifier is exposed as a common place. You can get history of identifier. You have a identifier as a separate primitive in the chain.
Correct.
So why don't we have extra option of storing this metadata? It can be JSON blob. I'm okay with that concept, as in it can be key value or a JSON blob with a complete fixed size. You can say 4K or some number.
Right, because look, the CID will automatically give you an option of saying that the blob is not changed at all, right? Right.
No, so see, end of the day, it will always go through an extrinsic, which means it is transparently over there. Not able to think of a use
Right.
case.
So
But
think of an update, right? Okay, I have an update that I'm doing to an identifier, which is changing the key value store as well as because the key value store is changed, that means the identifier is also updated, right? And these are two different palettes that is out there. Think about how that transaction is going to be like. Which one comes first?
no, I didn't understand it clearly. So I will tell you my use case just as a reference. Today, I have a statement as a way to anchor a VC, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, anchored a VC in, say, Confidex, let's say. And then, because of some use case, I have to create a VP for which I may, or that particular organization, it may be a European Union chain, I'm just saying, which is also hosted using Cloud, let's say, in the future. They may want the issuer to have a thing issued there, and we may have a portal. Let's assume it gets issued again. So, but that's where the use case talks about created at or some sample here. So it is like a sort of a migration. That particular identifier also would be referred in the new chain, but I may want to add a extra information with the same identifier saying was the original was in this particular chain. I'm just giving you as an example of a simple migration story. Or there may be set of things where I want to understand which application using. So there is some way of associating a statement identifier to some extra metadata. Today there is nothing, which is okay, but some places somebody may want to associate like statement with some extra data. So that is the way I am visualizing. Say assume I can always update a metadata and keep it, because it is not, I'm not treating it as a key value pair for now. I'm treating it as a metadata in a way that I'm treating it as extra information on the same statement, which is I am okay to publicly share.
No, I get that.
Huh.
It's like, suppose I went and updated the metadata again,
Okay.
and how do we propagate that change back to the identifier, or how does the event goes out? Because the event has been listened, and there is a metadata update event, which is completely separate from the statement palette.
Correct.
So,
Correct. I get your point. So then, okay, so you are saying identify, it is an identifier call, so you may miss it, right?
correct, because both the places, because of way people get confused is like both events say identifier updated. The statement will say identifier updated. The key value store will say identifier updated. Like which update follow which. So it'll be very difficult to kind of figure out the transition, like which is happening first. That is one, and then which event to listen to. Right, there are two events that are happening, both around the same identifier, coming from two different palettes. Right, there is an identifier from key value store. There's an identifier from statement, and both identifiers are the same. So that is where, again, if the key value store have a different identifier, it is referenced independently, right? And like when a metadata has been changed, the key value identifier has changed, and so that basically means your statement palette need to go through an update to reflect the latest identifier information. So you have the checks and balance so that it does not get disconnected from the initial state it created. So
yeah, I still feel.
Think of it like you created a statement called A, which has a metadata also is being identified as A, right? Both are sharing the same identifier. Now somebody went and changed the metadata information, which is of A. So now A is pointing to a different metadata. Now this basically means the key value store can also update the identifier in the identifier palette. Although the identifier has not made any changes, like okay, the statement has no changes at all. So the notification will go say that okay, the KV store issue.
So that is where I am thinking. So should we even have a use case? Like, let's leave that to ideally in a smart contract sense to the what do you say? An application to decide should they depend on metadata or not? Because
no.
my take is I'm just visualizing. I don't know. I can be wrong. I'm just debating here, considering it's a discussion. Should the chain take a decision that you should be bothered on this? Because the way I see it is always an extra information. So you should not be deciding your complete what do you say policy or decision based on this. The moment you are decided or depend on statement, you are always dependent on statement. You should never bother on a metadata. Metadata just provides extra information. I'm just visualizing it that way.
No. That creates a state conflict, right? Because the statement metadata has been referring to some other metadata when it got anchored, and somebody independently changed the statement, the statement metadata, right? And which is no trace on the statement palette of okay, something has changed for this particular stuff. Whereas if it is a separate identifier on the key value store, when the change happens, identifier changes because it is just referring to the value. We are not guaranteeing say that okay, every value will have a consistent identifier there. If the value changes, the key changes, which means okay, that need to be incorporated. If that change need to be pulled into the statement, the statement has to go through an update saying that, okay, look, a statement update has happened because there is a new link that has been created. So in that way, it makes sure that okay, every state transition can be audited, whether even if it is linked to multiple information coming from different palettes.
Got it. Yeah, I
Correct.
think. Yeah, I mean, I am in both minds, right? As in, I agree with your analysis, but I personally still believe there are use cases where
No. The use case, the reason I'm pushing this is, look, when we talk about smart contracts and other things,
Mhm.
they're not going to use smart statements. They're not going to use any of the palettes.
True.
It is purely based on what they store in the key value store, right?
True.
So, which basically means like they need to have an independent identifier that is backing the smart contract with.
I think it is in my opinion, there is total merit in actual key value store being a palette. That is no doubt. I think we should have that in the card.
Right.
That's a primary thing. I think a separate issue and following that as a project is completely required. But so whether a key value store as a reference to metadata or metadata means a tag, because then can we even call it a tag instead? Like the way I always see it as a like my Gmail labels, right? So I use it for my own self. It doesn't have a lot of meaning for many things.
No. I think
It's used as an application. I'm just
like no. You're right. I think where you're getting a bit confused is you're thinking it as metadata. Now, I'm
Correct.
thinking it as a value, right? One of the value items, value type can be a metadata, but it is not just metadata all the time, right? One of the palette, one of the application need to use the value to store metadata. Whereas a smart contract is not storing metadata. It might be storing the actual value. So it should be able to support different kind of values, and some palettes want to use it, some apps want to use it. Only metadata, that is fine. If it's a blob anyways, you can store the metadata the way you want, right? But if you change the metadata, it has an change in identifier, which basically means if things are dependent on it, yeah, there need to be an update operation that need to be performed so that we have the trace of changes that is happening across different palettes.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I'm understanding where you are coming from. So I get your point, because today there is no relation. I agree, because the
Right.
moment we separate it out to identifier, the update to metadata would happen through the identifier, which means the particular chain, like statement identifier or asset identifier, that difference is gone. So you won't get the event. Yes,
Right.
there is a challenge with,
Right.
because our chain's specialty is actually broadcasting the event. I mean, I'm talking in sense that many people may not understand the USP of CORD also. The broadcast is very important feature, or the eventing is a very important feature for application to watch for their particular things. And this is a very key enabler for it. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So,
Cool.
I think maybe a good way forward is like maybe start converting this into a palette and continue developing this. This is something that we really need. I think a lot of applications might require this to store various attributes and other things. So,
Okay. Cool. So coming back, I think we wanted to discuss. So again, what's the two things I see on a benchmark? You want to talk about them before we move to many testing? I agree, most of them are related to testing, which are the entry level issues in the card. So yeah, what do you on these two topics?
Yeah, we decided to benchmark our blockchain in an environment which might be much similar to where we will be running, similar to Confidex. So we are benchmarking both the palettes and the runtime in both 16 GB as well as 8 GB machines, and see which has better performance. And benchmarking is essentially setting the minimum execution time a machine would take to execute a extrinsic. So it creates something called as a weight, and we assign these weights to individual methods, which will be having the minimum execution a particular extrinsic might take for that machine.
Got it. Okay. Cool. So those who don't understand, so it is a weights and benchmarks are very crucial to make a blockchain run smoothly. The reason is in a blockchain, it is no more a single machine or a single company dealing with it. So people may come and join the network using their nodes of their choice, and hence a blockchain should have a bare minimum requirement of type of nodes to perform the operation, because each node independently has to perform each of these operations to reach to the consensus. And hence it is important that we benchmark it with the much smaller set of type of machine. That way we enable a low cost network also to operate, while we can also have a separate network running with a high performance machine on a particular use case. Whereas because it is a the card is a network which can be spawning multiple networks, we had to have an option of running it on a much what do you say, a machine which is on the cloud, which is a low cost and things like that. That was the idea behind it. And yeah, thank you, Vatsa, on that. Cool. So yeah, one of these we will be merging, and hence in the upcoming versions, the bare minimum performance requirement or will be
Hey, one thing pending here is running the 16 GB on AMD EPYC, right? Because the 8 GB is on AMD EPYC. Yeah.
We will be doing that by today.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, we can only merge one out of this two.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think my take is it is good to understand is the first step, and then going to take whichever one it is. So that's the first step. Cool. So other than that, yeah, the major PRs are mostly here, but some of the things I think we need to discuss in Satish. We still have time here.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, I think Satish and Vasa, this may be more of a discussion question, hence it is maybe a good topic to take it to discussion. What is this identifier, application, asset, statement, schema? What is this? Because I see some consequence here. What is the topic about?
Okay.
What's
And this was one of just a question or a discussion regarding how can we improve our chain performance by moving the creation of identifier logic into the application side. Right now, every palette we create the identifier based on few combination, for example, a creator or a digest, and that might take some compute time and bring our TPS low. So this is just exploring possibility of moving this identifier creation into the application side, but there are few ways to do as well, and a consequence which we might have to handle. One of them is collision possibility. That's what, and we can start doing this for where just for asset, statement, schema mainly, and if the collision does not take place, I think this can be discussed.
So you are saying this is more of a virtual identifier like thing, right? Because when I say virtual, it is application choice. Hence it is virtual, like, because application can choose to give a name there, or a UUID there, or a hash there, or a identifier like how we have CIDs or other things, right? That's how it would work. Okay, Satish, any thoughts around it? Anything you want to bring up?
I think it's a good thing to kind of work on, because I think, as Vatsa said, I think it can reduce the compute to a good extent, especially for palettes that are doing a lot of transaction, like asset statements, things like that, which might have a lot of transactions coming in, right? So it's a good thing to kind of move that to the application side. And I think to address the collision resistance, I think there are a couple of things that we can think through. One is by default moving the keys to double map. So you always have a key bounded to either a chain space or it could be a hash, like okay, one of it, right? It is kind of bounded with that so that the collisions are reduced because the same. It's always possible that okay, the same document can create maybe the same hash or a same UID from different users. It is quite possible. So, but if you use start using a combination, because it might be quite rare to have that collision happening within the same chain space. Because if it is happening within the same chain space, it could be an error we are notifying, right? Because if it has been happening across multiple chain space, multiple users, I think that is the real collision that we need to watch for.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good point, Satish, because if we say chain space is involved,
Yeah.
then I don't see a possibility of a collision. I mean, then if the collision happens, it may be a problem. That way, it is better to detect it.
Yeah. So that is one way to handle it, which kind of say that okay, we kind of universally open it, saying that okay, you can bring your identifier, and it is up to you to figure out what that identifier is. So that's kind of like a very broad open implementation. The other way to look at it is like the SDA has a deterministic way of creating an identifier based on the input it receives. So that could be another approach that we can look at, and where some of the logic that we use at the chain level today that can be brought into the SDK lines, so that the SDK can do it, and that kind of document it as a preferred method. Yes, if somebody doesn't want to use it for some reason, yes, they can choose other methods. But yeah, so we can solve it. I think this is something that is very useful.
Cool. Oh, okay. So this to be mostly done, right? So is it still open? I think we
Yep,
can.
it's still open because there's an issue with test utils of runtime.
Oh, okay.
Actual runtime is fine, but
Yeah, I'll suggest that I can maybe open a separate issue for that and then close this, because
Yeah, because looks like initial intent is all done.
correct.
So good. This is a good progress. So this, I mean, for those who don't know about it, this allows us to handle the latest upgrade to our base chain much smoothly. So this is good. So these are the C4GT things I was initially talking about. This is where you see good first issue tag, and they are ideally nice to pick up if you are a new developer. So I'm just talking about Chord here. I'll just quickly go through Chord.js. But in general, I think just by the discussions we were having, you can understand a lot of actions are happening. You can come and debate it. You can create your own issue here and discuss how you can contribute, right? So the other main thing is SDK. So this is Chord.js is what do you say? A required project along with the Chord chain, because you will always end up interacting with the chain, and generally not everybody would be constructing the RPC calls there itself. So SDK helps you to integrate with the application faster. So do check out this repo. And this is the repo where you are having the SDK code, right? And some demo scripts. And your application, most of the times, if you're a developer of an application, you will be consuming this repo. Just on the same topic, you see many open issues here. Some of them are created. And if you see some of the issues, there is an issue for supporting a Python SDK, and there is also a way to support a Golang based SDK. You can think of a few more options. So this is another repo to look into when you are contributing to Chord. Yeah, with that, I think we are just left with the last 10 minutes. So I'll stop looking into these things. We can again go through this next week, and we can actually make it as only new topics to discuss, so that or a project Kanban project like discussions around this. So that would be a good idea. So yeah, I'll with that I'll keep the floor open for others to talk. I know it is generally the active participant in these repos. Satish, Vasa, and myself we are talking, but happy to hear other questions.
Yeah, so Ammar had one question. So, is there a place anywhere that the COD version, COD.js version has been mentioned, the latest versions?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that is one. Okay, what's I? Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. The CORD version can be seen has a change spec in the runtime. It will be mentioned as 9200 currently. For the SDK, I think I'm okay.
Yeah, so ideally, I think because that's a good question because as a application developer, you will be dependent on published version of the SDK, and we don't generally publish for every commit of COD yet because there are the way to look at it is you are not running a blockchain with a local setup all the time. You will have to be running it with a version which is deployed as a network, right? Hence, there will be much lesser versions in SDK compared to the images which is visible in the card. So the best thing is actually looking into the npm.js itself. So we will be getting to more streamlined release process with the 9.3 release, which is I think in from this quarter there will be a lot more action happening in terms of how we will make release and all that. So I think there would be a release page in the SDK itself, which I'll try to keep. We will, as a community, try to keep it up to date. I think that should be the way to look into.
Yeah.
And also on the code side, it is just code minus minus version. Will give it the current runtime, the
Correct.
binary runtime version, not the WASM. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, it's a good. Sorry, Niranjan. Yeah, go ahead.
I thought you were done. No, what I was saying is, do you also want to cover the roadmap at a high level? Maybe we can take it in detail in the later calls, but maybe at a high level.
I would suggest we keep it for the next call because like the last 8 minutes, I think 10 minutes might be short enough to kind of talk
I
about.
agree. I think what we can do is highlight that would be one of the larger pieces we will do next month,
Correct.
and probably ensure that we dedicate the largest possible amount of time that we can walking through a published page or something, as well as talking through some of the upcoming capabilities.
Yep, true.
Yeah, makes sense, and that allows us to set up the maybe a project board in the GitHub
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a roadmap.
Okay, before we close this one out, any last thoughts, questions, topics that you want to bring up?
So yeah,
Good.
so I had a few discussions with some of the students from other colleges. So they were having wanted to get an idea of what the COD.js and COD was doing. So they wanted something on the use cases actually. So if we can build some kind of use cases related to COD.js or COD, so it is much easier for them to work around with that, play around with that. Can be a small projects that they can build. Yeah, you can just it's open for all the developers there. Yeah.
Do you mean that having a list of possible use cases so everyone who's wanting to contribute can say, oh, yeah, this is a use case I can relate to. I'll build something for this.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's something that we will have to do once we get more folks outside of DWay stepping in to contribute code, writing documentation, and also trying to think of what uses this blockchain, right? Because the real thing or the growth of a blockchain and network and the community around it is when there are more users, when it is useful of value. as a code base, innovative code based technology, or it's all very nice, but if it's not used anywhere, then it is very difficult to demonstrate value. So absolutely fantastic input. Prashant will put together something, or at least put together the start of something, and then we can sort of refine it as we go. All righty. I think we will wrap this one up. Thank you so much for joining at a short notice from what we had initially thought of this to be on Discord. We switched over to the Google Meet primarily to help recording. So for the next month, I'll structure this in a bit better way so that there's less ad hoc changing of communication channels and more knowledge, and people can, whoever is interested can actually add things to their calendar and we don't have to go around reminding them. So I've said that one up before we hit. What I was thinking is today is the second Tuesday of the month, and if we can keep to a schedule of second Tuesday of every month, that might get us to a discipline of having a meeting. If that works out for everyone. Is that fine? We'll set up the schedule like that, second Tuesday of every month. Unless it's not, it's a public holiday of some sort in India.
Yep, sounds good.
All righty then. Thank you so much, and see all of you around on the CORD Discord channel.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.